She thought he was just a driver, a kind stranger offering shelter from the storm. So when Brianna Collins stepped into that sleek black sedan on her first night at the most powerful company in New York, she had no idea she was sitting next to the man whose photo hung in the marble lobby, the legendary CEO himself. And when she invited him up to her tiny apartment in Eastwood, offering him coffee in a chipped mug, apologizing for the worn furniture and peeling paint, Logan Albright said nothing. He just listened, he just stayed, because for the first time in years, someone saw him as a person, not a title. But the next morning, when Brianna discovered the truth, everything shifted. The question wasn't just who he really was, it was why he let her believe the lie, and what happened next would change both their lives forever. If this story touches you in any way, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from right now? Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being here. The lobby of the Albright Group was made of Italian marble, with golden veins that caught the light from the fixtures embedded in the high ceiling. Brianna Collins still hadn't gotten used to the echo of her own footsteps in that imposing space. Every movement she made seemed amplified, as if the entire building were watching, judging whether she truly belonged there. At 9 o'clock on a suffocating summer Monday night in New York, the lobby was nearly empty. The security guards chatted quietly near the reception desk. The smell of cleaning products mixed with frigid air conditioning filled the air. Brianna tightened the strap of her worn canvas bag against her shoulder and headed toward the exit, exhausted, her eyes burning from reviewing spreadsheets for so long. 25 years old. First official day of work. Junior secretary in the marketing department of one of the most powerful companies in the country. She should be celebrating, but all Brianna felt was fear. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of disappointing. Fear of losing this opportunity before she even understood what she was doing there. She had arrived in New York 3 weeks earlier, coming from Maple Creek, a small town in the countryside where everyone knew everyone, where the streets had no official names and the supermarket closed at 6 in the evening. There, Brianna was the daughter of Mr. Collins, the groundskeeper who had worked on the Harrington farm for 30 years, and Mrs. Collins, a seamstress who mended clothes in the living room. There she was someone. Here in New York she was invisible, just another among thousands trying to survive. The apartment she shared with Megan, a nursing technician who worked night shifts, was in Eastwood, Queens. It was an honest place, but tired, a yellowing 3-story building with no elevator, stairs that creaked, and walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments. The rent was overdue. Brianna had paid half the previous week, promising the rest by Friday. The promise weighed like a stone in her chest. Her mother called every Sunday. She never complained, but Brianna heard the worry in her voice. Her father had suffered an accident 6 months earlier, falling from a ladder while fixing the barn roof. 3 broken ribs, shoulder surgery, months unable to work. The Harrington family had been generous, keeping his salary for 2 months, but after that, nothing. Just silence and bills piling up. Brianna had sent half of her first paycheck as soon as she received it, didn't even wait for it to clear. She transferred it directly from the ATM, hands shaking, knowing it meant another week eating instant noodles and walking whenever possible. But it was worth it. It had to be worth it. Victoria Hale, her new boss, was everything Brianna imagined a marketing executive would be. Impeccable blonde hair, manicured nails, straight posture, a voice that cut through the air like a sharp blade. On the first day, Victoria made it clear that mistakes would not be tolerated. This isn't a place to learn on the job, Brianna. You were hired because someone believed you were ready. Prove them right. So Brianna stayed. Stayed after everyone left. Reviewed every document 3 times. Checked every comma, every number, every format. When she finally shut down her computer, the clock on the wall read 9:15. As she crossed the lobby, Brianna stopped for a moment in front of the enormous framed photograph on the main wall. Logan Albright, CEO and founder of the Albright Group, the man who had transformed a small consulting firm into a global empire. He had a serious expression, almost severe, dark, penetrating eyes, as if evaluating whoever looked back, defined jawline, impeccable suit. There was something about that face that conveyed absolute power, but also loneliness. Brianna couldn't explain it. She just felt it. She would never see him in person, of course. Men like Logan Albright didn't walk the corridors, didn't talk to junior secretaries. They lived in another world, inaccessible, protected by layers upon layers of assistance, security, and impossible schedules. Outside, the heat of the day had given way to heavy, loaded air. Dark clouds gathered over Manhattan, blocking out the stars. Brianna looked at the sky and sighed. Summer storm, the worst possible time. She pulled out her phone and opened the ride app. The fare to Eastwood flashed on the screen, $43. She closed the app immediately. She didn't have it, not even close. The bus was left, the last one left at 9:40. If she ran, maybe she'd make it. But then, as she descended the wide steps of the main entrance, Brianna saw the black sedan. It was parked at the curb, engine running, low lights on. Elegant, discreet, expensive, slightly tinted windows. Brianna hesitated. She vaguely remembered hearing something about an executive transportation service for employees leaving late, but she thought that was only for managers and directors. The driver's window rolled down slowly. Brianna saw a man's profile, dark suit, upright posture, firm hands on the wheel. He wasn't wearing a driver's cap. There was no visible badge. But something about his posture, the way he waited there, made Brianna assume. "Excuse me," she said, approaching cautiously, bending slightly to speak through the window. Are you the company driver?" The man turned his face toward her. His eyes were dark, attentive. There was something familiar about that face, but Brianna couldn't identify what. Maybe it was just exhaustion. He watched her for a long moment. Then, in a deep, controlled voice, he answered, "Yes." "Where should I take you?" Brianna felt such relief she almost collapsed right there. "Eastwood, Queens. I know it's far, sorry, but get in." The word was said without emotion, without excessive kindness, but also without coldness, just direct. Brianna opened the back door and slid inside the car. The interior was another universe. Light beige leather, fine wood detailing on the dashboard, subtle smell of expensive cologne mixed with new leather. Absolute silence, as if the world outside had been cancelled. Brianna sank into the seat, feeling the weight of the entire day collapse onto her shoulders. "Address?" he asked, adjusting the rearview mirror. Brianna gave the address, her voice coming out low, almost embarrassed. "It's a small building, yellow, no doorman." He didn't respond, just put the car in motion. The rain began to fall when they were near the bridge. Fat drops hitting the glass, then turning into a curtain. Traffic was heavy. Red lights reflecting on the wet pavement. Brianna watched everything through the window. Her thoughts scrambled. "First day?" His voice interrupted the silence. She turned, surprised. How did you know? You left late. Reviewing everything 3 times, I imagine." Brianna laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "I know the type. And you? How long have you been driving for the company?" A pause. "Long enough?" Vague answer. But Brianna didn't insist. Maybe he didn't like talking about himself. Maybe it was just exhaustion. "Do you like the work?" he asked. "I don't know yet. Ask me again in a week." This time, he almost smiled. Brianna saw it in the rearview mirror. Why is it so important? The job. The question caught Brianna off guard. She bit her lip, wondering whether to answer honestly or just give a polite, superficial response. But something about that moment, maybe the rain, maybe the exhaustion, maybe the strange sense of anonymity inside that car, made her choose the truth. "My family depends on me," My father. He got hurt. Can't work. My mother does what she can, but it's not enough. So this job, it's not just about me. It's about them too. Silence. Brianna looked at her own hands. Sorry, you didn't need to know that. You don't need to apologize for asking a question, he said, his voice softer now. And you don't need to apologize for answering with the truth. Brianna didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. When the car finally stopped in front of the yellowing building, the rain had decreased to a fine drizzle. Brianna looked at the place she now called home and felt shame tighten her chest. Getting out of a car like that, to enter that old building with peeling paint and poor lighting. She grabbed the strap of her bag, ready to thank him and run. But then, on an impulse she herself didn't quite understand, she turned to him. Would you like to come up? Have some coffee? He hesitated. Brianna saw it in the rearview mirror. His fingers drummed once on the steering wheel. Then he turned off the engine. Coffee would be good. Brianna climbed the 3 flights of stairs with an impeccably suited man behind her, each step creaking under their combined weight, and she wondered if she'd made a mistake. The 3rd-floor hallway smelled of reheated food and mold. The ceiling light flickered irregularly. His Italian leather shoes, she noticed now expensive, genuine leather, were wet, leaving discreet marks on the worn floor. Sorry about the mess, she said, unlocking the door. My roommate and we don't have much space. It's fine. His voice remained calm, controlled. But there was something different now. A contained curiosity. The apartment was exactly what it looked like from the outside. Small, simple, honest. Second-hand sofa covered with a crocheted blanket her mother had made. Folding table against the wall. Open kitchen with misaligned cabinets and a stained sink. But it was clean, organized. Brianna made sure of that. He entered slowly, hands in his pockets, observing everything with quiet attention. He stopped in front of the small shelf where Brianna kept some framed photos. Her parents, in front of the simple wooden house in Maple Creek. Herself, at 17, in cap and gown at her high school graduation. A sunset over the cornfields. Maple Creek? He asked, leaning slightly forward. You know it? I've heard of it. Pause. Seems peaceful. Peaceful is a polite word for boring. Brianna smiled, taking off her shoes and heading to the kitchen. But it's home. She filled the old kettle with tap water and lit the stove. She grabbed the cloth filter she'd brought from home, the cheap coffee powder she bought at the corner market. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, just nervousness. Something about having that man there, in such an intimate, vulnerable space, made her heart race in a way she couldn't name. Please, sit, she said, pointing to the sofa. He obeyed, but seemed out of place, like a Renaissance sculpture placed in a garage. His suit probably cost more than 3 months' rent. The watch on his wrist, Brianna didn't even want to imagine. Do you live alone? He asked. With a roommate. Megan. She's a nursing technician. Works nights, so we're usually on different schedules. And do you like New York? Brianna poured the hot water over the coffee grounds, watching the dark liquid drip into the mug. I'm still deciding. Ask me again in 6 months. Fair answer. She served 2 mugs, one for her, one for him, and returned to the living room, sitting on the other end of the sofa, maintaining respectful distance. He accepted the mug with a nod, bringing it to his lips. Brianna watched his expression change subtly. It wasn't disgust, it was surprise, recognition. Cloth filter, he said, more to himself than to her. It's the way my mom always made it. She says the taste is different. She's right. He took another sip, slower this time. It's been a long time since I've had coffee like this. They stayed in silence for a moment. The rain started falling outside again, harder now, hitting the windows. The living room light was dim, yellowish, leaving soft shadows in the corners. Brianna held the warm mug between her hands, feeling the steam rise and warm her face. "Can I ask you something?" she finally said. "Go ahead. Why did you accept? Coming up, I mean, company drivers. You must have rules about that." He looked at her for a long moment. His dark eyes seemed to be evaluating something, weighing words. Finally, he answered, "You asked. People don't usually ask." Brianna frowned. "What do you mean? People assume, give orders, expect you to just do it, but you asked, politely, as if I had a choice." He paused. "It makes a difference." There was something in his voice now, something tired, almost bitter. Brianna couldn't identify exactly what, but she felt it went beyond a simple driver talking about work. "You seem—" she began, then stopped, not knowing how to finish the sentence. "I seem what?" "Tired, like you're carrying something heavy." He laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was short, dry, almost ironic. "Sharp perception. Sorry. I didn't mean to." "Don't." He interrupted her, but gently. "You're right. I am carrying." He took another sip of coffee. "Most people don't notice. Or they notice and don't care." Brianna didn't know what to say, so she did the only thing that seemed right. She just sat there in silence, offering only presence. "And you?" he asked after a while. "What do you want, besides supporting your family?" Brianna looked at the mug. "Honestly, I just want to survive one day at a time, maybe eventually grow in the company. I don't have fantasies about being CEO or anything like that. I just want stability, security, a life where I don't have to count coins before buying bread. Honest ambition, or lack of ambition depending on who you ask. No." His voice was firm now. "Knowing what you need and working for it. That's ambition. Most people don't have that kind of clarity." Brianna looked at him, really looked, for the first time since they'd entered the apartment. There was something about that face, something familiar she couldn't identify. Maybe she'd seen him before in the building, in the hallways. Maybe it was just her imagination. "What's your name?" she asked. "I realized we didn't introduce ourselves properly." A pause, too long to be natural. "Logan." "Logan." Brianna smiled. "Nice to meet you, Logan. I'm Brianna, but I imagine you already know that since you picked me up." He nodded, but said nothing more. They stayed talking for over an hour, about small things, about Maple Creek and the difference between living in a town where everyone knows you versus one where you're invisible, about the weight of disappointing people who depend on you, about the fear of failing and the feeling of never being enough. Logan, the driver who didn't seem like a driver, spoke little about himself. His answers were vague, careful, as if each word was measured before being said. But he listened, really listened. And there was something about the way he looked at Brianna, as if he were seeing something other people didn't see, that made her heart race for no apparent reason. When he finally stood up to leave, it was past midnight. The storm had calmed. Just a fine drizzle persisted outside. "Thank you for the coffee," he said, standing near the door. "Thank you for the ride and the conversation." He hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. Then he turned to her one last time. "Brianna?" "Yes?" "You're going to do well. At the company, I'm sure of it." She smiled, but it was an uncertain smile. "How can you know?" "Because you care, and people who care always find a way." Before she could respond, he was already gone, closing the door softly behind him. Brianna stood there in the middle of the living room, listening to his footsteps descend the stairs. She looked at the 2 empty mugs on the coffee table, at the crocheted blanket crumpled on the sofa, at the photos on the shelf. Something had happened that night. She didn't know exactly what, but she felt it, like a change in the air before a storm, like the first ray of sun after rain. Something had changed. And the next morning, Brianna Collins would discover exactly what. Brianna woke before the alarm went off. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, leaving the room in a grey-blue tone that made everything seem unreal. She lay there for a few minutes, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her mind automatically returning to the previous night. The luxury car, the coffee in the apartment, the strange conversation too intimate for two strangers. Logan, just Logan. No last name, no details. A driver who didn't seem like a driver, who spoke as if he carried the world on his shoulders, who had accepted coffee in a tiny apartment in Eastwood as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Brianna, you awake?" Megan's voice came from the other side of the door. She must have just gotten back from her night shift. Brianna heard shuffling footsteps in the hallway, then the bathroom faucet turning on. "Yeah," Brianna answered, getting up and wrapping herself in a thin robe. When she left the room, she found Megan in the kitchen, still in light blue scrubs, brown hair pulled back in a messy bun, deep dark circles marking her face. She was heating water for tea, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Rough night?" Brianna asked, grabbing a clean mug. "2 cardiac arrests, a family fight in the waiting room, and a patient who tried to bite me." Megan sighed, pouring hot water over the tea bag. "Just another normal Monday," Brianna smiled sympathetically. "You're a hero." "An exhausted and underpaid hero, but thanks." Megan took a sip, then looked at Brianna with half-closed eyes. "You got in late last night. I heard you coming up the stairs after midnight." "Yeah, stayed late at work. First day, you know how it is." "And how did you get back?" "Bus?" Brianna hesitated. For some reason, telling about the previous night felt like exposing something intimate. But Megan was her friend, her only friend in New York, actually. "The company has a transportation service for employees who leave late." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's fancy." "Yeah, it was unexpected." "And they brought you here, to Eastwood?" "Yes." Megan took another sip, thoughtful. "Weird. Why?" "Because you're a junior secretary, Brie, not a director. Companies don't usually send a private driver for a newly hired assistant. At most, they give you a transit pass." She shrugged. "But I don't know. Maybe your company is different." The observation stuck in Brianna's mind like a thorn. Megan was right. It was strange. Why would they send a car of that caliber for her? And why had the driver accepted to come up for coffee? Corporate drivers had strict rules, schedules, protocols. "Maybe he felt sorry for me," Brianna said, trying to sound casual. "It was raining hard." "Or maybe you're more important than you think." Megan smiled, tired, and patted Brianna's shoulder before dragging herself to the bedroom. "I'm going to pass out. Don't wake me unless the building's on fire." Brianna was left alone in the kitchen, looking at the 2 mugs drying by the sink, the same mugs from the night before. She had washed them carefully before sleeping, but she could still feel the ghost of that conversation lingering in the air. People who care always find a way. Why had those words sounded so personal? The bus ride to the Albright group took 50 minutes under normal conditions. That morning, with heavy traffic and 2 broken traffic lights on the route, it took an hour and 15 minutes. Brianna arrived at the building at 7:45, an hour and 15 minutes before her start time. The lobby was nearly empty. Just the cleaning staff wiping down the marble surfaces, the security guard at reception reading the newspaper, and 1 or 2 suited people hurrying across toward the elevators. Brianna greeted the guard with a shy wave and went up to the 12th floor, where the marketing department was located. The hallway was silent, lights still off in some rooms. Brianna left her bag on the desk, turned on the computer, and went to the break room to make coffee. While the machine rumbled, filling the air with the bitter, comforting smell, she heard voices. They were coming from Victoria Hale's office. Brianna had no intention of eavesdropping. She wasn't the type of person who hid behind doors, but Victoria's voice was altered, irritated, impatient, and the other voice. Brianna's blood ran cold. It was his voice, Logan. You can't just do this, Logan. Victoria spoke low, but the tone was cutting. You're the company's CEO. People talk, you know that. People always talk, Victoria. Logan's voice was calm but firm. And frankly, I don't care. You should care. Taking an employee home in your personal car, on her first day, with no official reason. It was raining. It's not about the rain and you know it. Silence. Brianna was paralyzed in the hallway, holding an empty mug, her heart beating so loud she was sure they would hear it from the other side of the door. CEO. Logan was the CEO. No, it couldn't be. Logan was the driver. He'd said yes when she asked. He had... Yes. Where should I take you? He'd never said, I'm the driver. He just confirmed when she assumed, oh God. Logan. Victoria's voice was softer now, almost worried. I know you're lonely. I know the position isolates you, but that doesn't justify... I don't need to justify anything, Victoria. He interrupted her, but without anger, just exhaustion. She was an employee leaving late in a storm, with no way to pay for transportation. I offered a ride. End of story. And the coffee? At her apartment? Long pause. She offered. It would have been rude to refuse. Victoria let out a heavy sigh. You're kidding me. I'm being honest. Being honest would have been telling her who you are. Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Maybe. But sometimes it's refreshing to be treated like a regular person. Brianna couldn't move. Couldn't breathe right. She wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't obey. She wanted to disappear, but she was stuck there in the hallway, holding an empty mug, as if it were the only real thing in that moment. The door opened. Victoria came out first, adjusting her grey blazer, her expression closed. She stopped when she saw Brianna standing there, eyes wide, clearly having heard everything. Miss Collins. Victoria's voice was dry, formal. You're here early. I... Brianna couldn't form a complete sentence. Logan appeared behind Victoria. He stopped in the doorway, and Brianna saw him, really saw him for the first time. The same face from the photograph in the lobby, the same defined jawline, the same dark, attentive eyes, the same impeccable suit. Just real, three-dimensional, human. Logan Albright, the CEO of the Albright Group. The man who had drunk coffee in her tiny apartment, sitting on her worn sofa, listening to her talk about Maple Creek and her fear of disappointing her family. Miss Collins, he said, his voice exactly the same as the night before, but now carrying something different. Recognition, maybe regret. You... Brianna's voice came out hoarse. You're Logan Albright, CEO of this company. He took a step forward, hands in his pockets. And yes, before you ask, I knew who you were last night. And no, I didn't correct your assumption about my position. Victoria looked from one to the other, clearly uncomfortable. I'll let you two talk, she said, quickly leaving down the hallway. Brianna and Logan were alone. The silence was deafening. You lied, Brianna finally said, her voice trembling. No, you assumed. I just didn't correct it. What's the difference? Logan sighed, running his hand through his hair, a human, tired gesture so different from the polished, untouchable CEO image. Technically, a big difference. Practically? He looked at her. None. And I know that. Why? The word came out more like an accusation than a question. Why did you do that? Because... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Because when you asked me if I was the driver, for the first time in years, someone was treating me like just someone, not like the CEO, not like Logan Albright, the untouchable, just like a man who could give a ride in the rain. And you thought it was right to let me believe a lie? No. He took another step forward. I didn't think it was right, but I thought it was necessary, at least for one night. Brianna let out a bitter laugh without humor. Necessary for what? To remember what it's like to be seen as human. The words hung in the air between them. Brianna wanted to be furious, wanted to scream, accuse him of manipulation, abuse of power, but something in his voice, something tired, true, desperate, made her hesitate. "You came up to my apartment," she said, quieter now. "Had coffee. Talk to me as if we were equals, because in that moment we were. No, we weren't. You're the owner of the company. I'm a secretary who makes $1,200 a month and shares an apartment in Eastwood. We were never equals." Logan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something different in them, something vulnerable. "You're right. We're not. But in that apartment for an hour, I wasn't the CEO. I was just Logan. And you offered me coffee. In a cloth filter, the way your mother made it, and talked to me about fear, about failure, about just wanting to survive one more day." He paused. "Do you know how long it's been since anyone did that? Talk to me like I was just human?" Brianna didn't know what to say. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I don't expect you to understand. But I'm being honest now, completely honest. Last night was the first time in years I felt seen, not as a title, not as a symbol of success, just as someone." Brianna's anger began to dissolve, replaced by something more complicated, confusion, empathy, and underneath it all, a pang of betrayal that still hurt. "You had no right to do that," she said, but her voice was weaker now. "I know. And now? What happens now?" Logan looked into her eyes. "Now you decide. If you want to keep working here. If you can trust me. If you can separate the man who had coffee on your sofa from the CEO who signs your paycheck." Brianna swallowed hard. "And if I can't, then I understand." He took a step back. "And I'll respect your decision." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, from somewhere distant in the building, a phone rang. The elevator beeped. Voices began to echo in the hallway. The office was waking up, the day officially beginning. "You have a meeting at 10, Logan said, his voice returning to a professional tone. "With HR." Brianna's heart raced. "What?" "Teresa Vasquez, Director of Human Resources. She'll explain everything." "Explain what?" But Logan was already walking away, hands in his pockets, posture upright, the CEO once again. 10 o'clock, Brianna, conference room 1204. And then he disappeared down the hallway, leaving Brianna alone, holding an empty coffee mug, the world spinning out of control around her. Brianna returned to her desk as if she were floating or sinking. She wasn't sure which. Her legs moved automatically, one in front of the other, but her mind was completely disconnected from her body. Logan Albright, the CEO, the man whose imposing photograph dominated the marble lobby. The same man who had sat on her worn sofa holding a cheap mug, listening to her talk about Maple Creek as if he really cared. She let herself fall into her office chair, staring at the computer screen without really seeing anything. Her fingers trembled slightly over the keyboard. Around her, the marketing department was coming to life. People entering, greeting each other, turning on computers, making coffee. Everything normal, routine, as if Brianna's world hadn't just been turned upside down. "Collins?" Victoria's voice cut through the air. "My office, now." Brianna stood up mechanically and followed her boss to the glass-walled office in the corner of the floor. Victoria closed the door, lowered the blinds, a gesture that never meant anything good, and sat behind her desk, fingers interlaced, expression unreadable. "Sit." Brianna obeyed, her hands sweating. Victoria remained silent for a long moment, just observing. Finally, she sighed. "You heard the conversation." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter if you meant to or not, you heard." Victoria leaned back in her chair. "And now you know that Logan Albright, CEO of this company, gave you a ride last night and came up to your apartment and had coffee." Brianna nodded, unable to speak. "You understand how this looks, Miss Collins?" "It looks bad," Brianna whispered. It looks complicated, Victoria corrected, and complicated in this environment quickly becomes bad. She paused. But here's the part you need to understand. Logan Albright isn't known for doing impulsive things. He's not the type of CEO who bypasses protocols without reason. If he did what he did, it's because he saw something in you. Brianna blinked, confused. Saw what? I don't know. And frankly, I'm not sure I want to know. Victoria leaned forward. But I'm going to give you advice, woman to woman, not boss to subordinate. Be careful. Logan is a brilliant man, visionary, but he's also isolated, lonely, and lonely people sometimes make decisions that confuse emotional need with something else. It wasn't anything like that, Brianna began, her cheeks burning. I just offered coffee. He seemed tired. I didn't know who he was. I know, and he knows you didn't know. Victoria sighed again, running her hand through her blonde hair. Look, I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm warning you. You have a meeting with HR in a bit. Teresa Vasquez is a sharp executive. She'll want to know exactly what happened last night, and depending on what you say, your life at this company could change drastically. Brianna's stomach turned. Do you think they're going to fire me? Victoria hesitated. For an instant, something like compassion crossed her face. Honestly, I don't know. Logan isn't known for firing people over misunderstandings. But this situation is unusual. She paused. Be honest with Teresa. Completely honest. It's your best chance. The next 2 hours were the longest of Brianna's life. She tried to work, review spreadsheets, answer emails, but the words blurred on the screen. Her brain was stuck in an infinite loop, reliving every second of the previous night. Every word exchanged, every look, the way Logan had held the coffee mug, the way he had looked at the photos on the shelf, the way his voice had sounded when he said, "People who care always find a way." He knew. The whole time, he knew who she was. And he let her believe he was just a driver. But why? To remember what it's like to be seen as human. The words echoed in Brianna's mind, stubborn, persistent. There was pain in those words, loneliness, and something deeper she couldn't name. Logan! At 5 to 10, Brianna grabbed her bag and went up to the 18th floor, where the Human Resources Department was located. The hallway there was different. Thicker carpet, walls painted in neutral, sophisticated tones, recessed lighting that didn't hurt the eyes, abstract paintings on the walls, absolute silence. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with thick-framed glasses and a professional smile, greeted her efficiently. "Miss Collins?" "Yes." "Mrs. Vasquez is waiting, room 1204. Brianna followed down the hallway, her heart beating faster and faster. She stopped in front of the dark wood door with the golden plaque, Teresa Vasquez, Director of Human Resources. She took a deep breath, knocked. "Come in." The room was spacious, but not ostentatious. Light wood desk, organized shelves with folders and books, a large window overlooking neighboring buildings, and behind the desk, Teresa Vasquez, a woman of approximately 50 years, short black hair, prescription glasses, impeccable brown suit. She had the air of someone who had seen everything and wasn't easily impressed. "Miss Collins, please sit." Brianna sat, hands clasped in her lap, trying to control her breathing. Teresa observed her for a moment, then picked up a folder from the desk and opened it. "I'm going to be direct, because I know you must be nervous. I'm already aware of everything that happened last night." Brianna's blood ran cold. "Mr. Albright informed me personally this morning about the ride he offered you and about the visit to your apartment." "Mrs. Vasquez, Teresa raised her hand, interrupting. "Let me finish. You're not in trouble, at least not the way you imagine." She closed the folder. "Actually, I'm here to discuss a change in your position within the company." Brianna blinked, confused. "Change? Yes. At Mr. Albright's request, you'll be transferred from the marketing department to the executive office, assuming the position of personal assistant to the CEO. For a moment, Brianna was sure she had heard wrong. What? Personal assistant to the CEO, Teresa repeated, her voice calm and measured. The position includes a salary increase of approximately 170% compared to your current position, in addition to additional benefits, including premium health insurance, meal vouchers, and access to executive development programs. Brianna couldn't breathe right. But I've been here for 2 days. I'm just a junior secretary. I don't have experience to... Mr. Albright disagrees. Teresa opened another folder, this one containing a contract. He has a remarkable talent for evaluating people, Miss Collins, and he believes you possess qualities that go beyond technical experience. What qualities? Brianna's voice came out louder than intended. I barely know how to use half the company's systems. Teresa looked at her, and for the first time, something like a smile touched her lips. Honesty, empathy, and the ability to treat him like a human being, not a symbol. She pushed the contract across the desk. Those are rare qualities in this environment, Miss Collins, rarer than you imagine. Brianna looked at the document. Numbers, clauses, legal terms she could barely process, but one thing jumped out. The salary, $3,200 monthly. More than double what she earned now, more than enough to pay rent, help her parents, finally breathe. I don't understand, she whispered. Why is he doing this? Teresa leaned back in her chair, fingers interlaced. Because last night you did something no one else at this company has done in years. You offered him something without expecting anything in return. Simple coffee, an honest conversation, and that touched something in him. But that doesn't make sense. I was just being polite. Exactly. Teresa smiled for real now. And for a man who spends all day surrounded by people who only talk to him because they want something, approval, promotion, contacts, your simple politeness was revolutionary. Brianna looked at the contract again. Her name was already typed there. Brianna Marie Collins. All she needed to do was sign, but something bothered her, something deep and insistent. This doesn't feel right, she finally said. It feels like he's promoting me out of guilt or pity, or because... She didn't finish the sentence, but both knew what she didn't say. Teresa nodded, as if expecting that reaction. I'm going to be frank with you, Miss Collins. Logan Albright doesn't do anything out of guilt or pity. He's a pragmatic businessman. If he's offering this position, it's because he believes you can perform it, and more importantly, because he believes you can bring something he needs. And what would that be? Perspective. Truth. Someone who isn't afraid to disagree with him when necessary. Teresa paused. Someone who sees him as Logan, not just as Mr. Albright. Brianna felt tears stinging her eyes. She blinked, trying to push them away. But what if I'm not good enough? What if I disappoint? Then you'll disappoint, and you'll learn, and you'll move forward. Teresa pushed a pen across the desk. But if you refuse out of fear, you'll never know what you're capable of. Brianna looked at the pen, at the contract, at Teresa, and then, slowly, she picked up the pen, but didn't sign. I need to talk to him, she said, to Mr. Albright, before I decide anything. Teresa studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Room 1802. He's waiting. The elevator went up in absolute silence, just the discreet hum of machinery and the muffled sound of Brianna's heart hammering against her ribs. She held the unsigned contract against her chest, her fingers slightly crumpling the edges of the paper. 18th floor, the top of the building, Logan Albright's kingdom. The doors opened to a completely different hallway from any other in the building. There was no carpet here, just dark wood flooring, polished like a mirror. The walls were white, clean, decorated with black and white photographs of urban landscapes around the world. New York, Tokyo, London, Paris, cities seen from above, from afar, as if whoever observed them was always above, always distant. There was only one door at the end of the hallway. Solid wood, no plaque, no identification. It wasn't necessary. Everyone knew what lay beyond that door. Brianna walked slowly, each step echoing in the silence. She stopped in front of the door, took a deep breath, knocked twice. "Come in." The voice was the same, deep, controlled. But now Brianna knew what lay behind it. She pushed the door open. Logan Albright's office was exactly what she expected, and at the same time completely different. Enormous, minimalist. An entire wall of glass offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, buildings stretching to the horizon, the clear blue morning sky, sunlight bouncing off the windows of neighboring skyscrapers. The desk was glass and brushed metal, with just a thin computer, a pen and a tablet. No photos, no personal objects, nothing that revealed who actually worked there. Logan was standing near the window, hands in his pockets, looking at the city. He didn't turn immediately when she entered. "Please close the door," he said, his voice soft. Brianna obeyed. The sound of the door closing seemed final, as if it cut off the rest of the world. He finally turned. He was still in a suit, dark grey today with a black tie, but there was something different in his posture, less rigid, more tired, as if the corporate armor was beginning to weigh. "Did Teresa explain the proposal?" he asked. "She did." "And?" Brianna held up the contract, still crumpled in her hands. "You lied to me." Logan didn't look away. "I omitted the truth. There's a difference." "There isn't," Brianna retorted, her voice firmer now. "You let me believe you were a driver. You came up to my apartment knowing exactly who you were and who I was. And I talked about my family, about my fear of failing, about things I would never tell the CEO of the company where I just started working." "I know. So why did you do it?" Logan took a deep breath, moving away from the window and walking to the desk. He leaned his hands on the glass surface, head down for a moment, as if gathering courage to say something difficult. "Because," he began, his voice lower now, "when you asked me if I was the driver and I saw the way you looked at me, without recognition, without flattery, without that reverent fear everyone here has, I had a moment of weakness." He raised his head, meeting her eyes. "I lied by saying yes because for a second I wanted to be just that, just a driver, just someone giving a ride in the rain. Not the CEO, not the Logan Albright whose photo is in the lobby. Just Logan." Brianna squeezed the contract between her fingers. "But you're not just that. You're the owner of this company. You have power over me, over my job, over my life." "I know. And that's exactly why I should have told the truth immediately." He straightened, his shoulders dropping slightly. "But I didn't. And when you invited me up, when you offered coffee in that simple apartment, when you talked to me as if I were just a person, I realized it was the first time in years anyone had done that." "Done what?" "Saw me." The word hung in the air between them. "Everyone here sees me, Brianna. But they don't see me. They see the title. They see the money. They see opportunity or threat. They see power. But no one sees the man." He paused. "You did." Brianna felt something tighten in her chest. She wanted to stay furious, wanted to scream, accuse him of manipulation, abuse of power. But there was something in his voice, something raw, true, that made her hesitate. "I saw because I thought you were like me," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone who works to survive. Someone who understands what it's like to count pennies at the end of the month. But you're not. You're the opposite of that." "No." The answer came quick, firm. "I'm not." Brianna blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Logan walked around the desk, approaching her slowly. He stopped a few steps away, hands still in his pockets, eyes fixed on her. "You think I've always been this? You think I was born in a glass office at the top of a building in Manhattan? I don't know. I was born in Cedar Falls, Iowa, in a wooden house with leaks in the roof and heating that only worked half the winter. My father worked at a corn processing plant. My mother cleaned houses. His voice was low, but every word carried weight. I know what it's like to eat instant noodles for a week. I know what it's like to wear donated clothes. I know what it's like to depend on weather and luck to know if there'll be food on the table next month. Brianna was paralyzed. The difference between us, Logan continued, isn't that I was never poor. It's that I managed to get out of it. And in the process, I forgot what it was like. He took another step, closing the distance between them even more. Last night, when you offered me coffee in a cloth filter, the way your mother made it, for a second, I remembered. I remembered what it was like to be human. I remembered what it was like to receive something without ulterior motives. And yes, I should have told the truth, but I was selfish. I wanted that moment for myself. Brianna didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel. Anger, empathy, confusion, everything mixed in an impossible-to-separate whirlwind. You did a social experiment on me, she finally said, her voice low. No. Logan shook his head. I was selfish, lonely, desperate for 5 minutes of normalcy, but it wasn't an experiment. It was... He paused, searching for the right word. It was emotional survival. Brianna looked at the contract in her hands. And this promotion... Is this selfishness too? Guilt? You trying to buy my silence? No. The answer was immediate. It's recognition. Of what? That you're the first person in years who treated me like a human being, and that I need that. I need someone by my side who isn't afraid to tell me the truth, who doesn't flatter me, who doesn't agree with everything I say, just because I'm the CEO. He held her gaze. I need someone like you. You don't know me. I know, but I saw enough to know you're exactly the type of person this company that I need. Brianna let out a humorless laugh. You're offering the position because of a cup of coffee? I'm offering the position because you saw me tired and offered coffee, because you talked about fear of failing without trying to impress anyone. Because when I asked why the job was important, you didn't say professional growth or career development. You said, my family depends on me. He paused. That's honesty, Brianna, true honesty, and it's worth much more than any MBA. Silence filled the office. Outside, the city continued moving, cars, people, lives happening in parallel. But in there, in that space suspended at the top of Manhattan, time seemed to have stopped. If I accept, Brianna said slowly, I need a condition. Logan raised an eyebrow. Condition. No lies, no convenient omissions. If I'm going to work this close to you, I need to trust that you're being honest with me. Always. He studied her for a long moment. Then for the first time since she'd entered the office, he smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a slight curve of the lips, but it was genuine. I accept. Brianna extended her hand. Then we have a deal, Mr. Albright. He took her hand, the grip firm, warm. Logan, he corrected. When we're alone, you can call me Logan. Logan, she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It felt strange, too intimate, but also right. He released her hand, but didn't step away. You'll start Monday. Teresa will handle all the paperwork. And Brianna? Yes? Thank you for the coffee, and for the conversation, and for not giving up on me yet. Brianna smiled despite everything. I'm still deciding if I will. He laughed, a low, surprising, almost forgotten sound. And in that moment, in the silent office at the top of the world, Brianna Collins realized her life had changed completely. And there was no going back. The rest of that Friday passed in a blur. Brianna returned to the 12th floor, to her desk in marketing, carrying the now signed contract inside her bag like it was a bomb about to explode. She tried to work, tried to focus on the spreadsheets and reports Victoria had left on her desk, but the numbers danced on the screen without making sense. Her mind was miles away, trapped in that glass office, reliving every word exchanged with Logan. When we're alone, you can call me Logan. Her co-workers around her talked about the weekend, about plans, about nothing important. Brianna pretended to listen, nodding at the right moment, smiling when it seemed appropriate. But inside, she was in silent panic. Monday she would start as the CEO's personal assistant. She, who 3 days ago was in Maple Creek, helping her mother sew buttons on old shirts. How had this happened so fast? At 5 in the afternoon, when the office started to empty, Victoria passed by Brianna's desk. She stopped, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I heard you had a productive meeting with Teresa." Brianna swallowed. "It was. And? I'm going to be transferred. Monday." Victoria nodded slowly, as if she already knew. She probably did. In a company like that, news traveled fast, especially when it involved the CEO. So it's true. Victoria didn't look surprised, just tired. Personal assistant to Logan Albright, 2 days with the company. "I know how it looks," Brianna began, her voice low. "You have no idea how it looks." Victoria pulled out a chair and sat down, lowering her voice. "But I'm going to give you advice since you won't be reporting to me anymore. Logan Albright is a complicated man. Brilliant, but complicated. He has impossible standards. He doesn't tolerate incompetence. And he doesn't know how to separate personal life from professional, because for him, there is no personal life. Just work." Brianna looked at her own hands. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've seen people enter that glass office thinking they were special. And I've seen those same people come out 6 months later, destroyed." Victoria paused. "Don't let him destroy you, Brianna. You seem too good for that." Before Brianna could respond, Victoria stood and left, leaving the words echoing in the air like a warning. The weekend was strange. Megan worked double shifts at the hospital, so Brianna was alone in the apartment, pacing from room to room, unable to rest. She called her mother on Saturday afternoon, but didn't tell her about the promotion. Not yet. She didn't want to create expectations in case everything collapsed. Her mother talked about her father, who was slowly improving, finally able to lift his right arm without feeling sharp pain. She talked about the neighbor who had offered extra sewing work. She talked about the weather, about the Harringtons' harvest, about small, safe things that made Maple Creek seem like a completely different world from Manhattan. "Are you okay, honey?" her mother asked at the end of the call. "Your voice sounds different." "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." "Are you eating right?" "I am." "Brianna, Mom, I promise everything's fine." But it wasn't, and they both knew it. Monday arrived like a runaway train. Brianna woke at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep more. She showered, changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something that seemed appropriate for a CEO's personal assistant. She ended up choosing a simple white blouse, black pants, and the only heels she owned, bought on sale 2 years ago. She arrived at the Albright Group at 7:15. The lobby was nearly empty, just the reception security guard and some cleaning staff. Brianna crossed the marble space, passed by Logan's imposing photograph, which now seemed to look directly at her, knowing everything, and went straight up to the 18th floor. The elevator doors opened to the silent hallway, but this time there was someone waiting. Teresa Vasquez, impeccable as always, with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. "Miss Collins, punctual, great sign. Good morning, Mrs. Vasquez. Come with me, I'll show you your new workstation." Brianna followed Teresa down the hallway, passing by the solid wood door of Logan's office, closed, no sound coming from inside, to a smaller room right next to it. It wasn't large, but it was private. A glass desk, Ergonomic chair, 2 monitors, phone, organized bookshelf. A smaller window offered a side view of the city. "This is your space," Teresa explained. "You'll have direct access to Mr. Albright's office through this door." She pointed to a discreet door in the side wall. "He prefers you to enter without knocking when necessary. Urgent meetings, important calls, anything that needs immediate attention." Brianna nodded, trying to absorb everything. "Your computer is already set up with all the access you'll need. Mr. Albright's calendar, emails, confidential documents, everything password protected, of course. Information security is top priority here." "Understood." Teresa placed the folder on the desk. Inside is a list of responsibilities, important contacts, emergency protocols, and this week's schedule. Mr. Albright has 3 board meetings, 2 international conferences, and a business dinner on Thursday. You'll be responsible for coordinating everything. Brianna's stomach tightened. "Everything? Everything?" Teresa looked at her, expression serious. "I know it seems like a lot, Miss Collins, and it is, but Mr. Albright trusts you can handle it, and I trust his judgment." "What if I fail?" Teresa was silent for a moment, then sighed softly. "Then you'll fail. Learn. And try again. But between us," she lowered her voice, "Logan Albright doesn't promote people he doesn't believe in. If he put you here, it's because he saw something. Don't waste it doubting yourself." Brianna nodded, throat tight. "He arrives at 8. Black coffee, no sugar, no milk. He doesn't eat breakfast, just coffee. And silence. He needs at least 30 minutes of silence before the first meeting of the day." Teresa turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Brianna, welcome to the executive team." And then she was gone, leaving Brianna alone in the small room, surrounded by responsibilities she barely understood. Logan arrived exactly at 8 o'clock. Brianna heard his footsteps in the hallway, firm, rhythmic, confident. The door to the office next door opened and closed. Silence. She looked at the cup of coffee she had prepared minutes before. Black coffee, no sugar, no milk, still steaming. She took a deep breath, stood up, picked up the cup, and knocked on the door connecting the 2 offices. "Come in." She pushed the door open. Logan was standing near the window, looking at the city, hands in his pockets. He turned when she entered. For a second, just a second, something crossed his face. Surprise, relief. Brianna couldn't identify it. "Good morning, Mr. Albright." He smiled slightly. Logan, she corrected, still holding the cup. "Coffee, black, as you requested." He approached, took the cup from her hands. Their fingers touched briefly. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Awkward silence. "You're nervous," he observed, taking a sip. "I'm terrified." He laughed quietly. "Honesty. Good start." "Teresa said you need 30 minutes of silence before the first meeting." "I do." "Then I'll leave you." Brianna turned to go. "Brianna!" She stopped, looking over her shoulder. "You're going to do well." "How do you know?" "Because you brought the coffee without me asking. And because you're being honest about the fear. That's worth more than fake confidence." She nodded, not knowing what to say, and left, closing the door softly behind her. Back at her desk, Brianna opened the folder Teresa had left. The task list was intimidating. Coordinate board meeting. Confirm attendance of 5 international directors. Review quarterly presentation. Prepare confidential documents for Thursday's dinner. She had no idea where to start, but she started anyway. And as she worked, immersed in spreadsheets and emails, phones ringing and messages arriving, a small part of her, the part that had grown up in Maple Creek, believing people like her didn't reach places like this, began to awaken. Maybe Victoria was wrong. Maybe Logan had seen something. Maybe, just maybe, she really belonged there. Or maybe she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Time would tell. The first weeks were a dive into deep waters without knowing how to swim. Brianna woke at 5 every morning, reviewed Logan's schedule before even leaving home, arrived at the office at 7 to prepare his coffee, organized documents, confirmed meetings, answered calls from executives whose names she only knew from business magazines. Everything was urgent. Everything was important. Everything was critical. She made mistakes, many. In the first week, she forgot to confirm the CFO's attendance at a teleconference with Tokyo investors. Logan didn't yell. He just looked at her with that calm, devastating expression and said, "This can't happen again." In the second week, she mixed up 2 confidential files, sending the wrong presentation to the board. Teresa had to intervene, fix the mistake before it caused major damage. Brianna spent the entire night without sleeping, certain she would be fired the next morning. But Logan just called her into his office, closed the door and said, "You're making mistakes because you're trying to do everything alone. Learn to ask for help. I thought you expected me to know. I expect you to learn. There's a difference." And so, slowly, painfully, Brianna began to learn. She learned that Logan didn't like beating around the bush. He preferred her to say, "I don't know, but I'll find out," rather than make up answers. She learned he got more irritated with fake competence than uncomfortable honesty. She learned that, despite the cold, untouchable facade, he noticed details. When she skipped lunch because she was overwhelmed, when she stayed late reviewing documents, when she arrived early to anticipate problems. And gradually, something began to change. Logan started asking her opinion. Not about trivial things, but about real decisions. "What do you think of this proposal? Does it seem fair? Or, does this speech sound convincing or too corporate?" At first, Brianna thought he was testing her, but then she realized he wasn't. He really wanted to know what she thought, and when she answered honestly, "It feels like you're trying to impress instead of communicate," he didn't get offended. He just agreed and rewrote. It was strange at first, having a voice in that world of power and million-dollar decisions, but Logan didn't treat her like a subordinate. He treated her like a partner, someone whose perspective mattered. And the executive team noticed. There were comments, of course, whispers in the hallways, speculative looks when Brianna entered meeting rooms right behind Logan. Once, she heard 2 female executives in the bathroom talking about her. 2 months with the company and she's already glued to the CEO. You know how she got that. Obvious. Same old story. Brianna had left the bathroom, cheeks burning, humiliation weighing on her chest. But she said nothing, just went back to work. Logan, however, noticed. That afternoon he called her into the office. "You're different today." "I'm fine." "Brianna." His voice was firm. "No lies, remember? That was the condition." She sighed, dropping her pen on the desk. "People talk. About me. About us. And what do they say? That I didn't deserve this position, that I got it through other means." Logan was silent for a long moment, then he stood up, walked over to stand in front of her. "Do you care what they think?" "Yes." The answer came out before she could filter it. "I care because part of me also thinks I don't deserve to be here." "Then let me show you something." He went back to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out a folder. He placed it in front of Brianna. "Open it." She obeyed. Inside were reports, graphs, detailed analyses. It took a few seconds for her to understand what she was seeing. "These are the executive office performance indicators for the last 6 months. Before you arrived, my late meeting rate was 18%, scheduling errors 12%, reports delivered past deadline 22%. He pointed to the most recent numbers. "In the last 8 weeks, since you took over, 0% late, 1% errors, that teleconference one which you never repeated, and all reports delivered 2 days early." Brianna looked at the numbers, incredulous. You're not here through other means, Brianna. You're here because you're exceptional at what you do, and anyone who suggests otherwise is lying to themselves. She felt her eyes burn. I still feel like an imposter. Welcome to the club. Logan smiled slightly. I feel that way every day. You? Me? The kid from Cedar Falls who grew up eating watery soup and wearing thrift store clothes. You think I don't look around sometimes and think, what am I doing here? Brianna had never thought about that. Logan Albright always seemed so in control, so sure, as if he'd been born for that role. The difference, he continued, is that I learned to silence that voice. You will too. At the end of the second month, something happened that changed everything. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, when the call came. Brianna was reviewing next week's schedule when the phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Mr. Albright's office. Miss Collins? The voice on the other end was formal, grave. This is Marcus Chen, from the law firm Whitmore and Associates. I need to speak with Mr. Albright immediately. It's urgent. He's in a meeting. Can I take a message? No. I need to speak with him now. It's about the Hartfield Industries lawsuit. The decision came down. Brianna felt her stomach drop. She knew about the lawsuit. Everyone at the company knew. Hartfield Industries was suing the Albright Group for breach of contract, demanding $200 million in damages. The case had been in court for 18 months. One moment, she stood up, went to Logan's office door, and knocked once before entering. He was in a video conference with the London office, the screen split into serious executive faces. Sorry to interrupt, she said low, but it's urgent. Whitmore and Associates. About Hartfield. Logan looked at her, then at the screen. Gentlemen, I'm going to need 5 minutes. He disconnected the call without waiting for a response and turned to Brianna. Transfer it. She ran back, transferred the call, and waited, heart racing. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 15, then 20. Finally, Logan came out of the office. His face was pale, tense. He walked straight to the window, hands in his pockets, looking at the city without really seeing. Logan? Brianna approached, hesitant. What happened? He didn't answer immediately, just stood there, breathing slowly, controlled. We lost, he finally said. His voice came out low, almost inaudible. The judge decided in Hartfield's favor. $250 million in damages. Brianna felt the floor disappear. 250. 50 more than the original request. Punitive damages. He ran his hand over his face. The biggest loss in the company's history. My God. The board is going to destroy me. The shareholders will want my head. The press. He stopped, shaking his head. The press is going to love this. Brianna didn't know what to do. She'd never seen Logan like this. Vulnerable, defeated, too human. Do you want to be alone? She asked quietly. No. The answer came quick, almost desperate. No, I don't want to be alone right now. She moved closer, standing beside him near the window. Outside, the city continued moving. Indifferent, relentless. It's going to be okay, she said, knowing it sounded hollow but needing to say something. You don't know that. No. But I know you've been through worse. And you're still here. He looked at her, and for the first time, Brianna saw something different in his eyes. Not just exhaustion, but gratitude, relief that he wasn't alone in that moment. Thank you, he said low, for being here. Always. The word came out before she could think, and the moment she said it, Brianna realized it was true. She would be there. Always, no matter what happened. And that realization, silent and inevitable, changed something inside her. Something she wasn't ready to name yet. News of the judicial defeat leaked to the press the next morning. Brianna arrived at the office at 6:30, earlier than usual, and found Logan already there, standing near the window, looking at the city still waking up. He hadn't gone home the night before. She knew that from his wrinkled clothes, the loose tie hanging on the back of the chair, the empty coffee cup on the desk. "Did you sleep here?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Didn't sleep." His voice was hoarse, tired. "Couldn't." Brianna set her bag aside and went to the corner table where she kept supplies. She started making fresh coffee in silence, giving him the space he seemed to need. The aroma began to fill the office, comforting, familiar. "The newspapers already published it," Logan said without turning around. "Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Bloomberg, all with devastating headlines. Albright Group suffers biggest judicial defeat in history. CEO faces leadership crisis. Shareholders question company's future." Brianna poured 2 cups, brought one to him. "Did you read all of them?" "All of them." "Why?" "Because I need to know how deep the hole I'm in is." She stood beside him, looking at the same urban landscape. Manhattan waking up, buildings reflecting the rising sun, millions of lives happening simultaneously, indifferent to the drama unfolding in that glass office. "You're going to get through this," she said, firm. "You keep saying that like it's a fact." "It is a fact because I know you." Logan finally turned, looking at her with an expression that mixed exhaustion and something deeper. "You've known me for 2 months, Brianna. And in those 2 months, I've seen you handle 3 operational crises, 2 board conflicts, and an internal sabotage attempt. I've seen you make decisions no one else would have the courage to make. I've seen you—" She stopped, searching for the right words. "I've seen you be stronger than anyone I know." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was bitter, loaded with irony. "Strong? You think I'm strong?" "Yes." "I deceived you, Brianna." His voice became lower, rawer. "That first night we met, I let you believe a lie, and you still think I'm strong?" "We already talked about this." "We did. But I never told you why. Not really." He moved away from the window, walked to the desk, leaned his hands on the glass surface. His posture was tense, as if he were preparing to confess something difficult. "That night, I was in the office until late, because I had just received bad news about the Hartfield lawsuit. The lawyers told me our chances were minimal, that we'd probably lose, and I was—" He paused. "I was exhausted, not just tired, exhausted from being the CEO, exhausted from having to pretend I had all the answers, exhausted from looking around and seeing only people who wanted something from me." Brianna remained silent, letting him speak. "When I saw you leaving the building, alone, in that storm, I saw someone who didn't know me. Someone who had no expectations about who I should be. And when you asked me if I was the driver, I had a choice. Tell the truth or have one night, just one night, where I didn't have to be Logan Albright." He raised his eyes, meeting hers. "It was selfish. It was manipulative. But it wasn't an experiment, Brianna. It was survival, emotional survival. Because in that moment, if I had to go back to my empty apartment, sit alone with the weight of that news, I don't know if—" His voice failed. "I don't know if I would have made it." Brianna felt something tighten in her chest. "Logan, and then you invited me up to have coffee in your small, simple, honest apartment. And you talked to me as if I were nobody. Just a driver who gave a ride in the rain, and for the first time in years, I felt light." He approached her, closing the distance between them. "So yes, I deceived you, but not because I wanted to manipulate you, because I desperately needed a moment of normalcy before coming back to this." He gestured around, encompassing the office, the view, the empire he had built. "To this prison I created myself." Brianna didn't know what to say. Part of her still felt the sting of betrayal from that first night, but another part, the part that had spent 2 months beside him, seeing him work until late, carry the weight of impossible decisions, deal with pressures most people would never know, understood. Do you see yourself as a prisoner? She finally asked. Sometimes. And me? What am I to you? Just someone who makes you feel normal? Logan was silent for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was loaded with something Brianna couldn't fully identify. At first, maybe. But now, he hesitated. Now you're the person who tells me the truth when everyone tells me what they think I want to hear. You're the person who stays when everything falls apart. You're... He stopped, as if the words were too big to be said. Essential, he finally concluded. You've become essential. The silence that followed was dense, loaded with unspoken things. Brianna took a step forward, closing the distance between them even more. You need to stop carrying everything alone. I'm the CEO. Carrying is my job. No, leading is your job. Carrying alone is stubbornness. He almost smiled. Stubbornness. Interesting diagnosis. It's true. You act like you need to be invincible, but no one is. And trying to be will only destroy you. Too wise for 25 years old. Too experienced for my age, she corrected. Growing up poor teaches you that. Logan observed her, something changing in his face. You understand, don't you? What it's like to carry the weight of other people. I do. My whole family depended on me. Still depends. If I fail here, you're not going to fail. How can you be sure? Because I won't let you. The answer came firm, definitive. You've become too important. To the company. To me. The words hung in the air, loaded with double meaning. Brianna felt her heart race. There was something happening there, in that moment, something that went beyond boss and assistant, something that had been growing silently over the last 2 months, hidden under meetings, documents, professional conversations. Logan. The door opened abruptly. Teresa Vasquez entered, expression tense. Sorry to interrupt, but the board just called an emergency meeting. 1 hour. They want answers about Hartfield. Logan stepped away from Brianna immediately, the professional mask returning to place. How many members confirmed? All of them, including Richard Hartley. Logan closed his eyes briefly. Richard Hartley was the board's oldest member, known for publicly questioning every one of Logan's decisions for the last 5 years. Perfect, he murmured, without any humor. Exactly what I needed. Teresa looked from Logan to Brianna, something indefinable passing across her face. Brianna, you're going to need to prepare all the lawsuit documents, complete timeline, decisions made, justifications, everything. How much time do I have? 50 minutes. I'll do it. Teresa nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Logan turned to Brianna. You don't have to do this. I can ask someone from legal... No! Brianna interrupted him, voice firm. I'm your assistant. This is my responsibility. Brianna, you said I'm essential, remember? Then let me be. He looked at her, and something changed in his expression. It wasn't exactly a smile, but it was close. 50 minutes, he said. 50 minutes. And then, without more words, Brianna left the office and dove into the most important work she had done until that moment, because Logan Albright was going to war, and she wasn't going to let him go unarmed. Brianna worked like she had never worked before. 50 minutes turned into a hurricane of documents, emails, urgent calls to the legal department, printing, organizing, reviewing. She assembled a complete folder. Timeline of the Hartfield lawsuit from the beginning, all decisions Logan made with their respective justifications, lawyers' opinions, risk analyses, everything dated, referenced, irrefutable. When Logan entered the board meeting room, an imposing room on the 19th floor, with an oval mahogany table and leather chairs, Brianna was beside him, carrying the folder like it was a weapon. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Brianna remained seated in a discreet chair in the corner, watching in silence as Logan faced 10 board members, answering sharp questions, defending every decision, absorbing criticism without backing down. Richard Hartley was relentless, accusing Logan of negligence, arrogance, putting ego above the company's interests. But Logan didn't break. And every time someone questioned a fact, a date, a decision, Brianna was ready. She passed the right document, murmured the necessary information, kept Logan armed with irrefutable data. In the end, when Richard Hartley finally fell silent, exhausted from trying to find gaps that didn't exist, the board president, a man named William Cross with grey hair and clinical gaze, leaned forward. "Mr. Albright, the loss is significant, devastating even. But the way you conducted this process, the transparency with which you made each decision, and the preparation demonstrated today," he looked around the table, "that speaks louder than the judicial outcome." Richard Hartley began to protest, but William cut him off with a gesture. "There are times when we do everything right and still lose. This was one of those times. And while I'd like to have an infallible CEO, I prefer to have a CEO who rarely errs and takes responsibility when he does." He fixed his eyes on Logan. "You have my vote of confidence." One by one, the other members nodded, some reluctant, some genuine, but all agreed. Richard Hartley was the only one who remained silent, face closed in disapproval. When the meeting ended, Logan left the room with upright posture, neutral expression. But Brianna saw the way his shoulders loosened slightly as soon as the door closed, saw the discreet sigh, saw the relief. "You did well," she said, low, as they walked back to the office. "We did well," he corrected. "Without you, I would have sunk in there. I just organized documents. You did much more than that. And you know it." Back in the office, Logan let himself fall into the chair, running his hands over his face. Brianna brought water, left it on the desk, stood there, uncertain whether she should leave and let him rest or stay in case he needed something. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair across the desk. She obeyed. Logan was silent for a long moment, just looking out the window. Then, unexpectedly, he opened a drawer and took out a different folder. Dark blue, thicker than the others. "There's something I want to show you," he said, pushing the folder across the desk. "Open it." Brianna took the folder, intrigued, and opened it. Inside were documents, maps, photographs, financial spreadsheets. It took a few seconds for her to understand what she was seeing. Albright Foundation for Rural Development, Pilot Project Maple Creek. Her heart skipped. What is this?" "Read." She began to read, turning pages slowly, eyes widening with each paragraph. It was a complete project, structured, detailed. Technical assistance for small farmers, training programs, financial support for families who suffered work accidents, equipment modernization, access to health and education, everything focused on Maple Creek. "Logan," her voice came out hoarse, "this is a project that's existed for 8 months, since before you joined the company." Brianna looked at him, confused. "How? Why?" Logan leaned back in the chair, fingers interlaced. "Because I also come from a place like Maple Creek. Cedar Falls wasn't much different. Small, rural, dependent on weather, luck, manual labor that destroys the body over time." He paused. "My father worked 30 years at a corn processing plant, literally broke his back, 2 surgeries, a miserable retirement, and I watched my mother count coins at the end of the month, deciding between buying medicine for him or food for us." Brianna felt tears stinging her eyes. "When this company started growing, when money started coming in, I swore I'd do something. Not out of guilt, not out of charity, but because I know what it's like to live like that. And I know that people like my father, like your parents, deserve more than crumbs." He pointed to the folder. This project is real, Brianna. It's funded, it's structured, it has a technical team, local partners, everything ready. The only thing missing was... What? The right person to be the bridge. Someone who understood both the technical side and the reality of who lives there. Someone who wouldn't treat farmers like numbers on a spreadsheet, but as people with names, stories, families. He leaned forward. I never found that person. Until you sat on my sofa, on your sofa, and talked about your father who got hurt, about your mother who sews clothes, about Maple Creek, as if it were the most important place in the world. And I realized, you're the bridge. Brianna couldn't speak, just held the folder, tears flowing freely now. Do you want me to work on this? I don't want you to work on it. I want you to lead it, along with your function here. You'll coordinate with the field team, adjust the project as needed, be Maple Creek's voice within the foundation. He paused. And yes, your father will be among the first beneficiaries, not because he's your father, but because he fits the profile perfectly. Rural worker, disabling accident, dependent family. Brianna covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Logan stood up, walked around the desk and knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hey, are you okay? I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Why are you doing this? Because it's right, because I can, and because... He hesitated. Because you made me remember why I started all this. It wasn't for money. It wasn't for power. It was to make a difference. And somewhere along the way I forgot. Brianna lowered her hands, looking at him through tears. You didn't forget. You were just too tired to remember. He smiled, a small, genuine smile without the corporate armor. Maybe. She wiped the tears with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. When does this start? 2 months. Technical team will do initial assessment, meetings with local leaders, project presentation. And you'll be there. With me. You're going. I am. I can't lead a foundation without visiting the places we're helping. He returned to the chair. Besides, it's been years since I left Manhattan. Maybe it's time to remember what the rest of the country is like. Brianna flipped through the folder again, reading details, seeing photographs of Maple Creek, her city, her home, alongside technical proposals, budgets, timelines. It was surreal. It was perfect. It was... This will change everything, she whispered. It will, Logan agreed. For them. And if we're honest, for us too. She looked at him, realizing the depth of those words. It wasn't just about the project. It was about what the project represented. A connection, a shared purpose, a reason to be together that went beyond contracts and corporate hierarchies. Thank you, she said, and the word came out loaded with everything she couldn't express. Don't thank me yet. You're going to work double. I know, and I don't care. Logan smiled again, and Brianna noticed something. That smile was appearing more frequently lately, and whenever it appeared, something inside her warmed in a way that had nothing to do with work. Something was changing between them, slowly, inevitably, and neither was ready to admit what. Not yet. That night, Brianna returned to the Eastwood apartment with the dark blue folder pressed against her chest, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And it was. Inside that folder was the chance to transform her family's life, her entire town's life. It was proof that Logan Albright wasn't just the relentless CEO everyone saw, but a man who still remembered where he came from. Megan was in the kitchen, eating instant noodles straight from the pot, still in blue scrubs from the hospital. She looked at Brianna with curiosity when she entered, eyes red but bright. You okay? Looks like you've been crying. I have. Brianna dropped her bag and the folder on the coffee table, letting herself fall onto the sofa. But not from sadness. What happened? Brianna told her. About the project, about Maple Creek, about how Logan had planned everything before even meeting her. and how now he wanted her to lead the implementation. Megan listened in silence, pot forgotten in her hand, eyes widening more and more. Wait, he created an entire rural development project for your town. It's not just my town. It's for communities like mine. Maple Creek is the pilot project. And your dad's going to be one of the beneficiaries? Yes. Megan put the pot aside and sat next to Brianna. Bri, this is incredible. You know that, right? I know. But, Brianna looked at her own hands, but nothing. I just didn't expect it. Didn't expect him to be like this. Like what? Human. The word came out low, almost embarrassed. I came into this company thinking I'd work for a distant, cold CEO, interested only in profit, and he is all that when he needs to be. But he's also more. Megan studied Brianna's face for a long moment. You like him. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I respect him. Brianna, what? You don't look at someone, you just respect the way you're looking now. Brianna felt her cheeks burn. Don't be ridiculous. He's my boss. So? Bosses can't be other things? Megan, stop. It's too complicated. I've been there 2 months. People already talk, already insinuate things. She shook her head. I can't give them more reasons for gossip. Megan sighed, taking Brianna's hand. Look, I get it. But I also know you've spent the last 2 months working until late, skipping meals, coming home exhausted, but happy. Happier than I've seen you in a long time. And it's not just because of the salary or stability. Brianna didn't respond. Because she didn't know what to say. Because part of her knew Megan was right, but admitting it out loud to another person would make everything too real, too dangerous. The next morning, Logan called her into the office before the rest of the executive floor even arrived. When Brianna entered, he was standing near the window, holding a coffee cup, looking at the waking city. Did you read everything? He asked without preamble. I did, 3 times. And Brianna closed the door behind her and walked until she stood beside him. It's perfect, seriously. Every detail, every aspect. It's exactly what Maple Creek needs. But, she looked at him surprised. How do you know there's a but? Because I know you. When you completely agree, you don't hesitate, and you hesitated. He turned, facing her. What's worrying you? Brianna took a deep breath. I need to know if this is real. If it's not just a reaction to what happened yesterday, to the board's pressure, the judicial defeat. If you're not giving me this as a way to compensate for something. Compensate for what? I don't know. Guilt? For deceiving me that first night? For putting me in this position so quickly? Logan put the cup on the desk, movements deliberate, controlled. Do you really think I'd create an 8-month project, invest millions of dollars, structure entire teams, just to compensate for guilt? No. But I need to hear from you that it's not. He approached, closing the distance between them until they were just inches apart. Brianna could see the fine lines around his eyes, marks of sleepless nights, heavy decisions, could feel the heat radiating from him, the discreet smell of coffee, and something that was uniquely Logan. This project, he said, voice low but firm, exists because I came from Cedar Falls. Because I know what it's like to see your father break his own body trying to feed the family. Because I swore that if I ever had the power to make a difference, I would. He held her gaze. You're not the reason for the project, Brianna. But you're the reason it's going to work, because without you, it would be just another well-intentioned but disconnected corporate program. And if I fail, if I'm not good enough, you'll make mistakes. Everyone does. But you won't fail because you're not doing this alone. You'll have an entire team supporting you, and you'll have me. The words hung in the air, loaded with double meaning. I accept, Brianna finally said. I'll lead the project. I'll give everything I have to make it work. But, he noticed the hesitation again. But I have a condition. Logan raised an eyebrow. Another one? Related to the first. When I agreed to work here, I said I needed total honesty. No omissions, no half-truths. And I agreed. You did. But I need to expand that condition. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. If I'm going to work this close to you, if I'm going to lead a project that means so much to both of us, I need to know you're not confusing things. Confusing how? Emotional need with something more. The words came out fast before she lost courage. Victoria warned me. Said you're lonely, that you're isolated by the position, and that sometimes lonely people confuse human connection with other things. Logan became very quiet. His expression didn't change, but something passed through his eyes. Hurt? Understanding? Brianna couldn't tell. And you believe that? He asked, voice neutral. I don't know what to believe. I just know I can't be a consolation, or a distraction, or a way for you to feel less alone. Is that what you think you are? I don't know what I am to you, and that's exactly the point. Logan took a step back, creating physical distance. He ran his hand through his hair, looked at the ceiling, then back at her. You're right, he finally said. You deserve clarity, and I haven't been clear because... He hesitated. Because I wasn't sure myself. And now? Now I know. He looked directly at her. You're not a consolation, Brianna, not a distraction, not a way for me to feel less alone. Though you do that, yes, He searched for the right words. You're the person who makes me want to be better, not as CEO, as a man. Brianna's heart raced. And that scares me, he continued, because it's been a long time since I let anyone in like this. I don't let anyone see me, really see me, the way you do. And yes, that creates a connection that goes beyond boss and assistant. But I'm not confusing anything, Brianna. I know exactly what I feel. And what do you feel? Long silence. Heavy. Loaded. Something I can't act on yet. Because you're right, it would be irresponsible, hasty, potentially destructive for both of us. He took a deep breath. But I won't lie and pretend it's just professional, not after demanding total honesty from you. Brianna didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to retreat, protect herself, keep the lines clear and safe. But another part, the honest part Logan had awakened in her, knew he wasn't alone in that feeling. So what do we do? She asked, voice low. We do our work, launch the project, keep everything professional while we're here, in this office, in this company. He paused. And trust that if this is real, whatever this is, it'll withstand time and circumstances. And if it doesn't, then at least we didn't destroy something important trying to rush it. Brianna nodded slowly. It was mature, sensible, safe. But it also hurt a little. Deal, she said, extending her hand. Logan looked at her hand, then at her face. Then, instead of shaking it, he held it gently between his, the touch warm, firm, loaded with silent promise. Deal. They stayed like that for a moment, suspended in time. Then Logan released her hand, took a step back, and the professional mask returned to place. You have a meeting with the Foundation team at 10. Teresa will introduce you to everyone. I'll be ready. I know you will be. Brianna left the office, closing the door softly behind her. Back at her own desk, she let herself fall into the chair, heart still racing, mind spinning. Something had changed in that office. A line had been drawn, and both knew they would eventually have to decide whether to cross it or not. But for now, there was work to do. And for the first time in a long time, Brianna Collins had something beyond survival to motivate her. She had purpose, she had hope. And she had someone who, despite all the complications, saw her exactly as she was. And that, for now, was enough. The next 3 months passed like a whirlwind. Brianna dove headfirst into the Maple Creek project, dividing her time between responsibilities as Logan's personal assistant and intensive work with the Albright Foundation team. There were meetings with agronomists, conferences with rural development specialists, weekly calls with Maple Creek leaders, budget reviews, schedule adjustments. And through it all, Logan was there. Not as the distant CEO everyone knew, but as a partner. He participated in meetings, questioned decisions, offered insights based on his own Cedar Falls experience. More than once, Brianna saw him disagree with experienced technicians because this wouldn't work in a real community, just on paper. And he was always right. The executive office became their world, a space where the walls between professional and personal became increasingly thin, even though both tried to maintain them. There were the small moments. Logan bringing coffee for her when he noticed Brianna had been immersed in documents for hours. Brianna leaving the window cracked because she knew he hated air conditioning that was too cold. Looks that lasted half a second longer than necessary. Contained smiles when something funny happened in a tedious meeting. There were also the bigger moments, like when Brianna, exhausted after 16 hours of work, fell asleep on the desk in his office. Logan covered her with his own blazer and continued working in silence, letting her rest. When she woke up 3 hours later, she found a lukewarm cup of tea beside her and a note, "You need to stop working until you pass out. L." Or like when Logan received news that one of the company's biggest investors was withdrawing funds, and Brianna simply stayed, didn't try to console him with empty words, just sat beside him at the empty conference table, offering silent presence until he was ready to talk. "You don't have to stay," he had said, voice tired. "I know. Then why do you stay?" "Because you would stay for me." And it was true. In the last 3 months, Logan had repeatedly proven he was on her side. When Victoria made passive-aggressive comments about obvious favoritism, Logan confronted her directly in a directors' meeting, making it clear Brianna had earned her position through exceptional work, not any other reason. When Richard Hartley tried to question her competence in a board presentation, Logan cut him off with irrefutable data about her performance. And when Brianna received an anonymous email, cruel, suggesting she had other talents besides organization, Logan personally tracked down the sender, a mid-level manager, and fired him that same afternoon. "You didn't have to do that," Brianna had said, shocked. "Yes, I did. No one talks about you like that, no one." The ferocity in his voice had been both frightening and comforting. But with all this proximity came tension. The tension of working side by side, of constantly being in each other's personal space, of sharing looks that said things that couldn't be said aloud. The tension of accidental touches that lasted half a second longer than they should. Of fingers meeting when passing documents, of shoulders brushing when leaning over the same screen. There were moments when Brianna caught Logan looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race, and moments when she found herself watching him, the way he frowned when concentrated, how he ran his hand through his hair when frustrated, how he smiled when something finally worked out. They never talked about it, maintained the silent agreement of professionalism, but it was getting harder and harder. One night, 4 months after Brianna's promotion, they were alone in the office reviewing the final details of the Maple Creek trip, scheduled for the following week. The clock showed almost midnight. The building was empty, just the discreet hum of air conditioning and the distant murmur of the city outside. "Last review," Logan said, closing the tablet. "Community presentation Friday afternoon. Meeting with local leaders Saturday morning. Visit to beneficiary properties Saturday afternoon. Dinner with your family Saturday night." Brianna looked up, surprised. "Dinner with my family? You didn't think I'd go to Maple Creek without meeting the people who raised you, did you?" I hadn't thought about it. Does your mother know you're coming?" "She does. But she doesn't know you're coming too." "It'll be a surprise then," he smiled. "Good or bad?" "My mother's going to freak out. She'll clean the house 3 times, make enough food for 20 people, and she'll kill me for not giving advance notice. Sounds like my mother. Brianna smiled, but there was nervousness behind it. Taking Logan to her parents' house, introducing him to family, showing where she came from, seemed too intimate, too dangerous. Crossed lines they had agreed not to cross. You don't have to go, she said, cautious. To their house, I mean. I know your schedule is full and... Brianna! He interrupted her, voice firm. I want to go, not out of obligation, because I want to meet the people who made you who you are. Her heart skipped. Okay, she said quietly, then we'll go. Comfortable silence settled between them. Brianna started organizing the papers scattered on the desk, preparing to leave. But then she noticed something. Logan? Do you remember that first night, when you gave me a ride? He looked up, something changing in his expression. I remember. Did you really not know who I was, before seeing me leave the building? Long pause. I knew, he finally admitted. I'd seen your file when Victoria hired you. Name, photo, background. I review all hires. So you lied when you said I was just an employee leaving late. I didn't lie. You were an employee leaving late. But yes, I knew your name. I knew where you came from. I knew your father had been hurt and you were supporting the family. He leaned back in the chair. And that's exactly why I offered the ride. Why? Because I saw my story in yours. I saw someone carrying a weight they shouldn't have to carry alone, and He hesitated. I wanted to lighten it a little, even if it was just for one night. Brianna felt something tighten in her chest. You're kinder than you let everyone see. Kindness is weakness in the corporate world. It's not. It's strength. Just not the kind of strength they teach in business schools. Logan observed her for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then unexpectedly, he stood up and walked to where she was, stopping right in front of her. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you regret it? Accepting this position? Giving me that ride that night? Brianna looked at him. Really looked. Saw the man behind the CEO, the boy from Cedar Falls who had fought to escape poverty, the son who watched his father break his back, the lonely man who had forgotten how to be seen as human. No, she said, voice firm. Not for a second. Even with all the complications, with the gossip, the pressure, he gestured vaguely between them, with all of this, especially because of all this. Logan let out a long sigh, as if he'd been holding his breath. Sometimes I think I'm being selfish, keeping you here, so close, when I know it would be easier for you if... If what? If you transferred me? If you kept me at a distance? Brianna shook her head. It wouldn't be easier, Logan. It would be safer. There's a difference. And you don't want safe? I've spent my whole life wanting safe. Stability, predictability. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them even more. But in the last 4 months, I've learned that sometimes the best things happen when you stop playing it safe. They stood there, stopped, so close Brianna could see the fine lines around his eyes, the exhaustion marked on his face, but also something more, something that made her feel seen in a way she'd never been before. Brianna, his voice came out hoarse. Logan, don't. She took a step back, breaking the moment. We made an agreement. Professional, until we're sure it's... Until what? Until we're sure it's real. That it's not just circumstance. He nodded, but something in his expression suggested he was already sure. And deep down, Brianna was too. But it still wasn't the time. I'm going home, she said, grabbing her bag. You should too. It's going to be a long week. I will in a few minutes. She left, but stopped at the door, looking over her shoulder. Logan? Yes? Thank you for everything. Always. And in that word, always, there was a promise that went far beyond boss and assistant, a promise that soon neither could ignore anymore. The trip to Maple Creek was scheduled for the following Friday. Brianna spent the entire week in a state of controlled nervousness, reviewing presentations, confirming logistical details, mentally rehearsing what it would be like to show her town, her world, to Logan. Part of her was excited. Another part was terrified. On Thursday night, the eve of the trip, she stayed late at the office, finishing the final adjustments. The building was silent, emptied. Just her, Logan, and maybe a few security guards on the lower floors. She was so immersed in work she didn't notice when Logan came out of his own office and entered hers. "You need to stop." Brianna jumped, hand on her chest. "You scared me." "Sorry." He approached, hands in his pockets. "But seriously, Brianna, it's almost 11 at night. The presentation is perfect. You've reviewed it 5 times. 6, and I still think I can improve the 3rd slide." Logan took the mouse from her hand, closed the file, and shut down the computer. "You can't. It's ready. And you're exhausted." "Logan, no arguments." He pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "You're nervous about tomorrow." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Brianna sighed, shoulders dropping. "I am." "Why?" "Because—" She searched for words. "Because Maple Creek is who I am. It's where I came from, and showing that to you feels like exposing something intimate. Do you think I'm going to judge?" "No, but I'll feel vulnerable." Logan was silent for a moment, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Want to know something? I'm nervous too." Brianna looked at him, surprised. "You?" "Me. Because tomorrow I'm going to meet the people who raised you. I'm going to see the house where you grew up, walk the streets you walked, truly understand where you came from." He looked at her. "And that's intimate too, Brianna. Because when I look at all of that, I'll understand you even more. And I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Why not?" "Because—" He hesitated, then let out a long sigh. "Because the more I understand you, the harder it gets to pretend this is just professional." The words hung in the air, heavy, inevitable. Brianna felt her heart race. "Logan, I know, we have an agreement, professional, until we're sure." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "But I'm sure, Brianna. I've been sure for months." She couldn't breathe right. "What are you saying?" Logan stood up, walked to the window, stood with his back to her for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was loaded with something raw, vulnerable. "I'm saying I can't pretend anymore. I'm saying I wake up thinking about you, that I spend all day waiting for the moments when we're alone, that when you leave at night, this office feels too empty, too silent." He turned, facing her. "I'm saying I'm tired of keeping my distance when all I want is to pull you close." Brianna stood up, legs trembling. "It's not fair for you to say this now." "I know. We agreed. We gave it time. We were careful. And I was careful. For 4 months." He took a step toward her. "But tomorrow we're going to Maple Creek. You're going to show me your house, your parents, your world. And I'm going to meet your mother and have dinner at the same table where you ate your whole life. And after all that—" He stopped right in front of her. "After all that, I won't be able to come back and pretend you're just my assistant." "Logan, please. Tell me you don't feel the same." His voice was low, intense. "Tell me it's just me. That all this tension, all these looks, all these moments are my imagination. Tell me that, and I'll stop right now." Brianna looked at him, at the man who had entered her life 4 months ago as a stranger in a storm, and who now was everything. She tried to form the words, tried to say yes, it was just him, that she felt nothing beyond professional respect, but the words wouldn't come, because they would be lies. "I can't," she finally whispered. "I can't say that because it's not true." Logan closed his eyes briefly, as if those words had lifted a weight from his shoulders. "Then tell me, what is true?" "The truth is—" Brianna took a deep breath, gathering courage. "The truth is, I wake up thinking about you too. That I stay late not because work demands it, but because I want to be near you, that when you smile, that rare, genuine smile, my heart races in a way that has nothing to do with work." She took a step forward, closing the distance between them until they were just inches apart. "The truth is, I tried to keep my distance, tried to be professional, but I failed, Logan, completely." He raised his hand, hesitant, as if asking for permission. Brianna nodded, almost imperceptibly. Logan touched her face, fingers sliding along her jawline, along the curve of her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious. "I didn't plan this," he said low. "Didn't plan to fall in love with the woman who mistook the CEO for a driver and offered me coffee in a cloth filter." Brianna laughed, but it was a wet laugh from tears she didn't know were falling. "I didn't plan to fall in love with the most complicated, stubborn, impossible man I've ever met either. Fall in love." Logan repeated the word as if testing its weight. I am." The admission came out liberated, finally. "I'm in love with you. And I know it's complicated, I know there'll be gossip, I know it's risky. But I don't care anymore." Logan held her face with both hands now, thumbs wiping away the falling tears. "Are you sure? Because if we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. People will talk. They'll question. They'll try to destroy us." "Let them try." Brianna. "Logan, I spent 4 months being careful, being sensible, keeping my distance because I thought it was right." She placed her hands over his, still on her face. "But you know what I realized? The right thing isn't always the safe thing. Sometimes the right thing is what makes you feel alive, and you make me feel alive." He pulled her close, forehead resting against hers, eyes closed, breathing deeply as if memorizing that moment. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "That's stupid. We deserve each other." Logan laughed quietly, and then finally, after months of contained tension, unreturned looks, accidental touches that lasted half a second too long, he kissed her. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if he were still giving her the chance to pull away. But Brianna didn't pull away. She leaned into the kiss, hands sliding up to the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. And then the kiss changed. Became deeper, more urgent, loaded with 4 months of contained desire, nights awake thinking about each other, stolen moments that were never enough. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Officially," Brianna said, voice hoarse, "we just became the cliché of the CEO and his assistant." Logan laughed, a genuine, joyful, free sound. "It really is a cliché, isn't it?" "Extremely." "And do you care?" "Not one bit." He kissed her again, quicker this time, then pulled her into a tight embrace. Brianna sank into him, feeling his warmth, the scent that was uniquely Logan, the way he held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Tomorrow's going to be interesting," he murmured against her hair. "Why?" "Because I'm going to meet your parents knowing I'm completely in love with their daughter." Brianna pulled back just enough to look at him. "They're going to love you." "How can you be sure?" "Because I love you, and they trust my judgment." The words came out natural, easy. "I love you." She hadn't planned to say it. But there, in that silent office, in his arms, it seemed like the rightest thing in the world. Logan looked at her with an intensity that made her heart stop. "Say that again." "What?" "What you just said." Brianna smiled. "I love you, Logan Albright." He closed his eyes, as if the words were a gift he hadn't expected to receive. "I love you too, more than I can express." They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, the world outside continuing without them. And for the first time in months, the tension that had hung over them, the doubt, the fear, the hesitation, finally dissolved, replaced by something stronger, something real, something that, despite all the complications, was worth every risk. The trip to Maple Creek began the next morning. A private flight from New York to the nearest regional airport, followed by 40 minutes driving on rural roads Brianna knew by heart. She watched through the window as the landscape changed, skyscrapers giving way to open fields, concrete replaced by earth and vegetation, the frenetic pace of the city slowing to the quiet cadence of the countryside. Logan was beside her in the back seat, fingers discreetly intertwined. They still hadn't discussed how to reveal the relationship publicly, but there, away from the office's eyes, they could simply be. "It's different than I imagined," Logan commented, watching the cornfield stretching to the horizon. "Different how?" "More beautiful, peaceful." He looked at her. "I can understand why you miss it. I used to, but now—" Brianna squeezed his hand. "Now New York feels more like home." He smiled, that small, genuine smile she had learned to recognize as exclusively hers. They arrived in Maple Creek shortly after noon. The town was exactly as Brianna remembered. The main street with its modest stores, the white church on the hilltop, the scattered houses, the little market where her mother bought groceries, everything small, everything familiar, everything loaded with memories. The project presentation took place in the local school gym, transformed for the occasion with chairs arranged in rows and a projector borrowed from City Hall. More than 200 people attended, practically half the town's population. Brianna saw familiar faces, neighbors, old teachers, childhood friends who had stayed while she left, and she saw her parents. Sitting in the third row, her father with his arm still a bit stiff from the accident, her mother with hands clasped in her lap, both looking at their daughter on stage with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Brianna presented the project with Logan beside her, explaining in simple terms, not corporate jargon, but language that made sense to farmers, to people who depended on land and weather. She talked about technical assistance, equipment modernization, financial support for families who suffered accidents. She spoke from the heart, not just with numbers. And when Logan spoke, telling his own story of Cedar Falls, of the father who broke his back in a factory, of the mother who cleaned houses, there was a profound silence in the room. Because those people recognized the story, they lived versions of it every day. "I'm not here as CEO of a distant company," Logan said, voice firm but accessible. "I'm here as someone who understands, who knows what it's like to wake up not knowing if work will be enough, who knows what it's like to see someone you love get hurt because there's no choice but to continue." He looked around the room. "And I'm here to say, you're not alone. Not anymore." The reaction was immediate. Questions, applause, tears. People approaching afterward, thanking, telling their own stories, offering coffee, hugs, genuine welcomes. And through it all, Brianna watched Logan, the man who ruled an empire in Manhattan, talking to a 60-year-old farmer about irrigation, listening to a single mother talk about the difficulties of maintaining the farm alone, crouching down to be at eye level with a curious child who wanted to know if he was famous. He was at home there, as much as she was. Dinner at Brianna's parents' house happened Saturday night. The house was small, living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, but impeccably clean and tidy. Brianna's mother, Susan, had spent all day cooking. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables from the backyard garden, apple pie that was the family specialty. Her father, Michael, shook Logan's hand at the door with surprising strength for someone who had been hurt 6 months earlier. "Mr. Albright, it's an honor to have you here." "Logan, please, and the honor is mine." Susan appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a floral apron, eyes immediately welling up when she saw her daughter. "Brianna!" The hug was long, tight, loaded with months of longing. When Susan finally released Brianna, she turned to Logan with an expression mixing shyness and gratitude. "Mr. Albright." "Logan, thank you. For everything. For the project, for taking care of our Brianna, for being here." "You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Collins. Your daughter is exceptional. I'm just giving her the tools to shine Susan looked from Logan to Brianna, and something changed in her expression, something only mothers notice. "Come on, the food will get cold." Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Logan didn't act like a CEO. He acted like a guest, complimenting the food, asking questions about the Harrington farm where Michael had worked, listening to Susan talk about sewing with genuine interest. He told stories about Cedar Falls, about what it was like growing up poor in the middle of nowhere, about how his mother worked miracles with simple ingredients. "Just like your mother," Susan said, smiling at Brianna. "This girl always knew how to make a little go far." Brianna blushed. "Mom, it's true. Remember when you were 12 and made that stew with leftovers that lasted an entire week?" Logan laughed. "I didn't know you cooked." "I do, but in New York I never have time." "We'll change that." The promise in his voice was clear. After dinner, while Susan showed Logan old photos of Brianna on the living room shelf, including a particularly embarrassing one from high school graduation with braces on her teeth, Michael pulled his daughter outside to the backyard. "He's good for you," her father said without preamble, looking at the stars shining intensely in the rural sky without the city's light pollution. "Dad, you don't have to hide, honey. I see the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him." Michael smiled. "It's the same way I looked at your mother when we were young. Still do, actually." Brianna felt her eyes burn. "Isn't it complicated for you? Him being my boss, being rich, powerful?" Michael shook his head. "No, because I saw the way he talked to those people today, without arrogance, without condescension, as an equal. And I saw the way he treated your mother tonight, with genuine respect, not fake politeness." He placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "He may be CEO, Brie, but he's a good man, and that's what matters." Tears rolled down Brianna's face. "Thank you, Dad. You deserve to be happy, honey. After everything you've done for us, after carrying so much alone." His voice failed. "You deserve someone who'll carry alongside you." They went back inside and found Susan and Logan laughing about an old story. Something about Brianna trying to make a cake at 10 years old and nearly burning down the kitchen. The scene was so natural, so right, that Brianna's heart overflowed. When they finally said goodbye, it was past midnight. Susan hugged Brianna again, whispering in her ear, "He loves you, my daughter. Anyone with eyes can see it." "I know, Mom." "And you?" "I love him too." Susan pulled back, holding her daughter's face between her hands. "Then don't let him go. True love is rare. When you find it, hold on tight." On the way back to the hotel, a small cottage Logan himself had reserved by a lakeside, they drove in silence, hands intertwined, the starry sky above. "Your parents are amazing," Logan finally said. "They are. And they loved you." "How can you tell?" "Because my mother never invites anyone to come back, and she invited you 3 times. Logan smiled. "I'll accept next time." "Next time? Of course, this..." He gestured around, encompassing Maple Creek, the starry night, everything. "This is part of who you are, and I want to know all the parts." Brianna's heart skipped. They arrived at the cottage, a rustic but comfortable construction, with a fireplace, porch overlooking the lake, absolute silence except for the discreet sound of water. Logan lit the fireplace, while Brianna stood on the porch, watching the moon's reflection on the dark surface of the lake. He joined her, wrapping her from behind with his arms, chin resting on top of her head. "Thank you," he said low. "For what?" "For bringing me here. For letting me meet your family. For..." He paused. "For letting me be part of your life." Brianna turned in his arms, hands rising to his face. "You're not part of my life, Logan. You are my life now." He kissed her, soft and deep, as if they had all the time in the world, and maybe they did, because for the first time, neither was running, neither was hiding. They were just Logan and Brianna, not CEO and assistant, not boss and employee, but two people who had found each other in the storm and decided to stay. "What happens now?" she asked later, nestled beside him on the sofa in front of the fireplace. "Now we go back to New York. Officially launch the project. Deal with the inevitable gossip about our relationship," he kissed her forehead, "and build something real, together. People will talk. Let them, we know the truth. It could affect your reputation. My reputation survived a $250 million judicial defeat. It'll survive this too." He pulled her closer. "Besides, I don't care what they think, not anymore." Brianna smiled against his chest. Who would have thought? Logan Albright, the untouchable CEO, in love with the assistant who mistook him for a driver. "Best decision she ever made," he joked. "Second best." What was the best? Accepting the coffee that night. Because that's when everything changed. Logan was silent for a moment, fingers playing with her hair. "You're right. Everything changed that night. But not because you offered me coffee." "No? No. It changed because you saw me. Really saw me. And made me remember that underneath everything, the title, the money, the power, there's still a man. An imperfect, lonely, sometimes lost man. But still, a man. And now that man is no longer alone." Brianna raised her face, meeting his eyes in the golden glow of the fireplace. "He never will be again." And in that promise, silent but solid, both found something they had searched for their whole lives without knowing. Not just love, but home. In each other. When Brianna left Maple Creek Sunday morning, sitting beside Logan in the car, taking them back to the airport, she looked through the window one last time. She saw the town that raised her, the streets that shaped her, the place that would always be part of her. But she knew she wasn't leaving it behind. She was taking it with her. Just as she was taking Logan into the future, a future where he wasn't just the distant CEO, but the man she loved, the man with whom she chose to build a life. And as the town became smaller in the rearview mirror, giving way to the open road and the infinite blue sky, Brianna knew with absolute certainty she would never again mistake Logan Albright for a simple driver, and he would never again be just the CEO to her. He was her partner, her love, her future, and that finally was more than enough. It was everything. Sometimes the deepest changes begin with the simplest gestures. A ride in the rain, a cup of coffee offered without expecting anything in return, a moment of vulnerability shared between two strangers who, without knowing it, were searching for the same thing, to be seen. Brianna never imagined that mistaking a CEO for a driver would lead her to love. And Logan never imagined that letting someone see him, really see him, would change everything. But sometimes that's how life works. Not in calculated grand gestures, but in small acts of courage. The courage to offer coffee to a stranger, the courage to admit loneliness, the courage to choose love even when it seems too complicated. And maybe, deep down, this story isn't just about them. Maybe it's about all of us, about the moments when we choose to see beyond appearances, beyond titles, beyond fear. Because in the end, what truly matters isn't where we came from or what we achieved. It's who we choose to love, and who chooses to love us back, exactly as we are. If this story touched your heart in any way, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments. Where are you listening from? Your support is what allows us to keep bringing stories like this. Thank you for every minute you dedicated to this journey. Until the next story.